So here's a question for you. What if the greatest threat to your leadership isn't a lack of resources, and it's certainly not fear, but misdirected bravery?
Hmm.
Or maybe, on the flip side, what if it's that brilliant, perfect strategy that you're just perpetually too hesitant to actually execute?
That tension, that exact tension you're describing is, well, it's the fault line running through so much of modern leadership.
Right.
We've spent this deep dive really synthesizing a wide array of leadership literature. I mean, everything from ancient texts to modern organizational psychology. And they all seem to circle this one dynamic, the sacred integration of courage and vision.
And it's funny because we're taught, quite rightly, to be bold and decisive. But we're also taught to be strategic and patient and discerning.
Exactly.
But the core insight that just kept popping up in all the material we reviewed, it really gets at an uncomfortable truth. Courage, when it's isolated, does not guarantee progress.
And vision, when it's left alone, guarantees no movement whatsoever.
That's the definition of misalignment.
It is. You need both, working in tandem. The literature gives us a really clear maxim for this. Courage initiates movement, but vision sustains direction.
Right, so if you have movement without direction, you just burn out.
You burn out, and if you have direction without any movement, you're just standing still while the world passes you by.
Our mission today, then, is to help you, our listener, perform a crucial diagnostic. We want you to be able to map yourself on what some of our sources are calling the Courage Vision Alignment Matrix. Where are you operating? Are you acting boldly, but, without real clarity? Or are you seeing things perfectly clearly, but just hesitating to move?
Because in this era of constant disruption, getting that alignment right is, well, it's absolutely critical to the impact you want to make.
And this misalignment, this is where it all starts to go wrong.
It's precisely where organizational fatigue and, frankly, individual failure usually begin. It's not necessarily about a lack of talent. It's that when the pressure is highest, courage so often outruns wisdom.
So the other way around.
Or, conversely, vision just never graduates from the planning stage into actual execution.
When you put it like that, it sounds incredibly costly.
Oh, it is. Because the separation forces leaders into one of two distinct, very high-comes danger zones. The first is what we call the impulsive zone.
Okay.
This is driven by courage without vision. This is reactionary leadership, really. It's born from pressure or anxiety or just the ego's need to appear decisive.
This is the leader who's always putting out fires.
That they accidentally started themselves, exactly.
So if you're a leader and your team feels like it's constantly reacting, scrambling to chase the latest trend or fix the newest emergency, you're probably in that impulsive zone.
You're mistaking frantic motion for genuine progress. You're exhausting everyone, burning bridges, changing course every quarter. It's the definition of motion without meaning.
Okay, so that's one extreme. What's the other?
The other danger, the opposite extreme, is vision without courage. This is the deferred zone.
Now, this looks a lot safer on the surface, though. This is the leader who is strategic. They're planning, they're reviewing, analyzing. But you're saying that wisdom can turn into weakness here.
It absolutely does. They stall in perpetual analysis, waiting for a perfect set of conditions that, let's be honest, never arrives in real life.
So it starts as discernment, just mutates.
It mutates into delay, and that incredible calling they received is reduced to mere contemplation. They have perfect clarity, but zero impact. If you're the leader whose desk is piled high with brilliant, unexecuted plans, you are likely stuck right here.
But hold on, isn't that just being prudent? Maybe we're confusing necessary patience with spiritual procrastination. How do you draw the line?
That is the critical distinction. Prudence moves when it has sufficient information to act responsibly. Delay waits until risk is completely eliminated.
Which is never.
And the literature notes that the accelerated pace of change today just amplifies the damage of both extremes. Reckless courage, its damage is amplified. An impulsive product launch can ruin a brand overnight.
And the timid vision gets exposed faster than ever.
Much faster. If you wait for perfect market conditions, your competitor, who acted with, say, 80% clarity, already owns the space.
Wow. That raises the stakes quite a bit. Okay, so let's look closer at that first extreme, the danger of impulsivity. This is where action is just completely untethered from purpose.
Right. When courage lacks that revelation, it fundamentally turns destructive.
And we can see this dynamic playing out everywhere, but some of the most piercing examples come from these ancient accounts that show that just being bold doesn't sanctify the action.
Let's start with King Saul, back in 1 Samuel 13.
Okay, so when I read that story, I just see a general under immense pressure trying to save his army. The prophet Samuel is late. The Philistines are gathering. Saul's troops are literally abandoning him.
That's right. I mean, he was acting under extreme measurable pressure. He's thinking, I have to do something to stop the bleeding.
So he does. He performs a sacrifice, which was only authorized for the priest, for Samuel.
And what did the literature tell us was the real failure in that decisive action?
It wasn't cowardice. It was unsubmitted courage. He acted without divine authorization. He mistook urgency for obedience. He was driven by insecurity, really, and the need to appear strong to his men, and it overrode the clear mandate he'd been given.
And his action looked courageous to his fleeing soldiers. It probably felt decisive to him. But Samuel's rebuke just cut straight to the issue. Obedience is better than sacrifice.
So Saul's failure was an act of personal self-assertion.
Courage detached from the overall vision of how God was leading Israel. This is the organizational equivalent of a manager launching a high-risk project just to hit a quarterly metric, bypassing all the established governance simply because the pressure felt intolerable.
And it cost him everything.
Yeah.
He even compounded the error later by imposing this rash oath on his starving people, turning his impulsive courage into coercion against his own followers.
It's a perfect illustration. Bold action does not automatically equal righteous action.
Okay, now let's compare that to Peter. In Gethsemane, he's the picture of loyalty. When the mob comes for Jesus, Peter grabs his sword, the ultimate act of immediate physical courage, and he risks his life.
And Jesus rebukes him sharply.
Why?
Well, because Peter's loyalty was sincere and his bravery was undeniable, but his courage was fundamentally misaligned with Christ's redemptive vision.
He was fighting the wrong battle.
Exactly. He was defending the immediate outcome, the here and now, instead of trusting the long-term painful process that the vision actually demanded.
That is such a critical realization for us today. It means courage can actively oppose the vision, even if the person wielding that courage sincerely believes they're serving the greater good.
Yes, it's acting based on what you think should happen, rather than what has been revealed or established as the higher purpose.
So the takeaway here, from what I'm gathering, is that biblical courage is never autonomous.
It can't be. It's strength derived from submission to divine instruction, to alignment. Courage severed from that deeper revelation just mutates into recklessness. It causes burnout, spiritual disillusionment for the leader and their entire organization.
It's action that's always short-sighted.
Always. And self-serving, even when it's cloaked in zeal.
Okay, that gives us a really clear picture of the impulsive zone. Let's pivot now to that second, quieter danger. The paralysis of vision without courage.
The deferred zone.
The deferred zone, where clarity under a calling just becomes theoretical, and it leads to a kind of spiritual procrastination.
And this failure is often more insidious because it's so easy to rationalize. Leaders say they're waiting for conditions that guarantee safety, or more commonly, waiting until they feel perfectly adequate for the task.
And the enduring, kind of frustrating example of this pathology is Moses. At the burning bush in Exodus 3 and 4,
Right.
he receives this undeniable, spectacular vision, a direct commission to liberate Israel, yet he hesitates repeatedly.
He protests his inadequacy. He asks, who am I, and what if they don't believe me? Moses' resistance, it wasn't a failure of vision. He believed the revelation. He knew the task.
It was a failure of courage.
A total failure of courage, because he feared the inherent cost of obedience and the sheer scale of the risk involved.
So he wanted the glorious destination without accepting the daunting journey.
Precisely. And God didn't respond by changing the vision or, reducing the scope. God responded by confronting Moses' reluctance directly. He essentially said, I know who you are. The question is, do you know who is sending you?
Wow.
The vision was accurate, but his courage was catastrophically underdeveloped, and that led to massive personal delay and forced God to provide Aaron as a temporary solution.
That is analysis paralysis taken to an extreme. And we see that today in leaders who are constantly enrolling in new training or hiring new consultants, creating new dashboards.
All while delaying the actual messy work of implementation.
Yeah.
Yes, we also see this pathology so clearly in the story of Jonah. Jonah knew precisely what God intended, the mission to Nineveh. His flight wasn't due to ignorance. It was pure resistance to obedience because the action required immense personal discomfort and risk.
He didn't disagree with the mission itself. He just disagreed with the cost to him personally.
Yes. And his flight reveals that intellectual clarity alone does not produce faithfulness. Vision unaccompanied by courage doesn't preserve obedience. It just postpones it. often catastrophically.
The ocean, the ship, the storm, all of that disaster was caused by a clear-sighted man just refusing to move.
And perhaps the most heartbreaking organizational example of this is the spies at the Promised Land, in Numbers 13 and 14.
So all 12 spies go into Canaan. They share the exact same accurate vision of the abundance there. They even bring back the physical proof, that massive cluster of grapes.
But 10 of them allowed fear seeing the giants in the fortified cities to completely reshape their imagination.
Their vision was still clear.
Still perfectly clear, but their courage collapsed under the perceived threat. They had proof of the opportunity, but they defaulted to the memory of the threat.
That is a powerful, very sharp insight for us. This shows that collective fear can actively sabotage a known, proven opportunity. It turns organizational clarity into group stagnation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The 10 spies convinced an entire generation that the risk was greater than the reward, despite having God's explicit directive. Their failure wasn't a failure of eyesight, but a failure of faith in action. Vision, which was given not for contemplation but for participation, became paralyzed, and the result, as we know, was 40 years of wandering.
Oh. When revelation is given, delay becomes disobedience, even if you cloak it in spiritual language like prudence or strategic waiting.
Exactly.
That brings us to the crucial part of our deep dive, the alignment zone. If faithful leadership is neither impulsive nor inert, what is the consistent pattern that integrates movement with clarity?
Well, the pattern is consistent. God reveals direction, then demands action-obedient movement rooted in that clarity. The solution is always integration, not isolation. And the archetype of this kind of integrated leadership, the one who lived consistently in the alignment zone, is David.
David facing Goliath, 1 Samuel 17. His action is often dismissed as, reckless, youthful bravado, but our analysis shows it was the absolute opposite.
It really was. His courage was profoundly anchored in covenant vision. He saw what everyone else in the Israelite army missed. Everyone else saw a massive, insurmountable warrior.
But David saw an opponent challenging God's honor.
Exactly. The battle, for David, didn't belong to him, it belonged to the Lord. His physical bravery flowed directly from his theological certainty.
So his courage wasn't impulse. It was a non-negotiable response to that theological clarity. His action was, it was inevitable once that vision was rightly aligned.
That integration of clear vision.
Yeah.
God owns the battle, and courage. I must step into the field. That is the definition of the alignment zone.
Okay, so if courage initiates the movement and vision sustains the direction, what is the critical discipline that makes sure they work together without causing chaos or delay? What keeps us out of those danger zones?
The missing link is discernment.
Discernment.
It's the sacred discipline that learns to honor timing as much as purpose. Purpose tells you what to do. That's vision. Timing tells you when to do it. That's courage. Discernment keeps courage from becoming recklessness and vision from turning into mere idealistic illusion.
That makes perfect sense. Discernment is the filter. But since the path forward is almost always incomplete, we never have all the information, what are the practical anchors leaders need to ensure they stay in this alignment zone?
The literature points us toward 3 essential anchors we need when the path is incomplete. And these are how you practically exercise discernment.
Okay, let's unpack those.
The first is submission to God's character as the ultimate compass. When the details of the path are absent, when the market data is contradictory or the threat seems too large, you have to trust his nature, his faithfulness, his sovereignty, his goodness.
So that anchors your vision not in current circumstances, but in eternal truth.
Exactly. If you trust his character, you can move even when the roadmap only shows the very next step.
That's powerful. It shifts the confidence from my capability to his nature. Okay, what's the second anchor?
The second is discernment through community. We often think of courage as a solitary, heroic act, but faithful action is rarely undertaken in isolation. Counsel, prayer, communal discernment like the early church asking for confirmation in Acts 13.2. These are critical safeguards against impulsive action or, conversely, paralyzing fear.
So the community serves as an external check on both my personal enthusiasm, preventing recklessness, and my personal fear, preventing delay.
Perfectly said. When the 10 spies panicked, the error was that they listened to each other's fear instead of listening to the faithful minority. A good community provides the necessary friction and perspective to keep you moving faithfully, not foolishly.
And finally, the third anchor.
The third is a willingness to be corrected. Faithful leadership, unlike stubborn leadership, remains profoundly teachable. You might act decisively, anchored in vision and courage, but the market might immediately tell you that you were wrong, or a mentor might show you a blind spot. Leaders have to be prepared to adjust, repent, and listen, even after they've acted decisively.
That really reframes what courage is, doesn't it?
Hmm.
It's not just the bravery to launch the ship. It's the humility to adjust the sails when the first storm hits.
Yes.
When courage speaks and vision leads and discernment guides the timing. Then leadership becomes neither destructive nor dormant. It becomes faithful and enduring. It's about learning to operate right where those two virtues converge in your organization.
And it requires a level of honest self-examination. So
Yeah.
we really want to encourage you to use the concepts we've discussed today as a diagnostic tool. Picture that alignment matrix we mentioned.
All right.
You need to identify where you fall. The impulsive zone, that's reckless action. The deferred zone, strategic inaction. Or the alignment zone, which is faithful movement.
So here is our final challenge for you, the listener. Use this framework in your own context this week. If you've been stuck in the deferred zone, identify one concrete, immediate step of courage that aligns with a long-term vision God has already given you.
And if you've been impulsive,
If you've been impulsive, pause and ensure your next bold action is ratified by your deepest purpose, not just by pressure.
movement matters, yes, but direction matters infinitely more.
Because if obedience is the ultimate measure of leadership, then the question isn't whether the moment demands action, but whether we will become the kind of people who can act faithfully trusting God enough to move when the vision is clear, and humble enough to wait for the proper timing until courage and vision converge perfectly in obedience.